We've got a route, and that's pretty fun. Let's start thinking about actually making this talk to the GitHub API. So what I want to be able to do is type a GitHub user into the form and have it get me some information about that user. So let's add a form to the page. First, I'm going to throw the GitHub logo on here. I went ahead and found the image for that. I'll paste this in Slack. Here's the image coming at you in Slack. There you go. Here's the image. Then underneath that, I'll put a form. Inside the form, I'll put a div. Inside that div, I'll put an input of type text. And I'll put another div with an input with a submit button in it. And it'll say look up GitHub user on the button. So button type equals submit. Yeah, I don't need multiple lines. My input, I suppose we should say required and autofocus, like we tend to do. Required, autofocus. Autofocus is camel cased in React, of course. We can give it a name if we want. You don't have to, for our purposes. You may notice that image is really freaking huge. So I went ahead and made some CSS for this. So this time we're not going to do CSS in JavaScript. We're going to just keep doing CSS files. So another way you could have been doing this, let's make a new file. I'm going to call it capital G github.css. We'll just have a separate CSS file for each component. And remember, there's nothing magic that ties this to that component, even if I import it. It's just for the sake of convenience, for making our making it easy to find the CSS for a particular component. So I just pasted this in Slack. So I still have to put this GitHub class in front of everything if I want to make sure that these rules don't apply to anything outside this component. But I can import this in here. Import ./github.css. There we go. That's better. And by now we know the trick for tying this component to tying this input to state, right? Right now we can type in here, but that's because it's still just a traditional old HTML input managing its own state. Let's add some state to our GitHub component. Don't have to do it inside the constructor anymore if we don't want to. I'll just call this username. This.state.username start as an empty string. So on my input here, I'll say value equals this.state.username. Then I expect not to be able to type in here anymore, right? So I need to add handle change. Handle change. Which we'll call this.setState. It'll update username with event.target.value. Don't forget then, on change, call this.handleChange. Familiar with this trick by now? Done it enough times? So let's find the GitHub component in my React Dev Tools. Here it is. This.state.username is empty. I start typing, and it updates this.state.username. So I added handle change. I added some state. Set the value. Don't forget the on change. So here's my new GitHub component after I've done this. I'll paste the whole thing in Slack. All tricks we've done before. Add a controlled form to GitHub component.